Seconds.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Doherty. I'm the district attorney for the 20th Judicial District, which is Boulder County. And I appreciate taking time to join us today for our community town hall regarding an officer-involved incident that took place in the North Boulder area on December 17th of 2023. I appreciate folks making time to join us today. I think we have about 10 people who are joining us for this town hall. And I really appreciate that the community makes time to join us for these discussions so that I could be completely transparent in the information that was provided to us by the critical incident team, as well as our careful and thorough review of that investigation, and ultimately the decision that the police officers involved in this tragic incident should not be criminally prosecuted for their actions. The town hall is going to take us through a number of things, and I just wanted to preview for you a couple of factors to be aware of. So first, this is a virtual town hall that allows us the opportunity to connect with people from all around the community. We announced that we were doing the town hall through the media, social media sites, the decision letter we sent out previously, and it's also been posted on the district attorney website. The community town hall is also recorded. So if there are individuals who are unable to attend, or for whatever reason want to go back and watch it again, they can go to our website, the district attorney's website, and view this town hall since it is recorded and placed on the website. During the town hall, I'm going to be showing a number of photos and videos, as you might expect, but I really want to make sure folks are aware. Some of these photos and videos are graphic, and they include some violent, difficult things to watch. So if you're not prepared for that, I encourage you to sign off now, and I'll give you a heads up before we get to the actual photos and video. And I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware as we go through that the purpose of the town hall is to give you some insight into what we reviewed from the critical incident team's investigation and determining whether anybody should be criminally charged for what took place on December 17th, 2023. So our office conducts a community town hall after any investigation involving the Boulder County investigation team, also referred to as the critical incident team. We have been doing that for the last several years in a continuing effort to be transparent, accessible, and address any questions. We're one of the only district attorney's offices in the state that I'm aware of that conducts these town halls. I think they're really important. I think we should be doing this to just make sure that people are aware of what goes into the decision we make after police officers use deadly or potentially deadly physical force. I also will share with you that I'm aware that the Boulder Police Department is going to be releasing segments from security video and also body-worn camera video later today in an effort to be transparent. So you can refer to the Boulder Police Department for more information, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that I know that the Boulder Police Department will be releasing some video as well later today and then over the weekend. And we can talk more about the video and the amount of video we have in this case as we move forward through the presentation. One of the things that I'll be doing during today's presentation is looking down at my phone. And the reason I do that is because I have other people from the district attorney's office who are helping monitor for questions. So we had invited the community to submit questions in advance of the presentation. We just had 4 sent to us just a couple minutes ago, and then we had 4 sent to us via email by a community member earlier this week. And I'll answer those questions to the best of my ability at the end of the presentation. But if you have questions and you put it in the Q&A, these individuals on staff will help me go through those questions and make sure that I answer them before the end of the presentation. So if I'm looking at my phone, I just wanted to explain to you why I'm doing that as we go along. So let me tell you first how the process works when we do have an incident that requires the critical incident team to respond. So the critical incident team for the 20th Judicial District, which again is Boulder County, is also known as the Boulder County Investigation Team. They investigated this incident. It's a multi-agency team. The goal of that team is to make sure we have a thorough, objective, and independent review for any use of force incident. That is exactly how the process should work, in that the home agency, in other words, the law enforcement agency to which the officer or officers belong who've used force, are not involved in the investigation into the use of force and not involved in the review of the investigation of the use of force. This standard that we have, and you see that on the second bullet point, is broader than state law in that any law enforcement officer who uses deadly or potentially deadly physical force against a person while acting under the color of official law enforcement duties. Under state law, this review would have been required in this situation because it's the discharge of a firearm by a peace officer or police officer who results where the situation results in injury or death. How the team is notified. So generally, the notification will come from the agency involved in the shooting or the incident, since they're actually at the scene of the incident and aware of the circumstances. That, when I say it's generally how it works, that's how it worked in this situation as well, where Boulder Police Department officers were involved in this incident. They quickly notified the Boulder County Critical Incident Team, and the Boulder County Critical Incident Team was able to respond and conduct an extremely thorough investigation. I do want to recognize that the timeliness of that notification is really important so that we can have investigators, detectives, crime scene analysts from other agencies respond and take control of the crime scene and all the interviews, any search warrants that are required, and any follow-up interviews that are required. And that's what happened in this case, where the Boulder County investigation team was notified very, very quickly by Boulder Police Department. A page went out, a notification went out to all the team members. That also includes members of the district attorney's office. So myself and members of our staff here also respond. Our role in responding is to observe all the interviews, all the work being done, go to the crime scene, make sure all the warrants are being completed properly and subject to court approval, and overall just ensuring the integrity of the investigation. The purpose of the investigation is to determine whether any criminal charges are warranted for any of the police officers. That, as district attorney, is my role. My role is to determine whether any of the officers involved should be charged criminally and prosecuted for their actions. So in this specific case, it was to determine whether criminal charges were warranted against officers Nathan Schultz and Jarrett Mastriona for their use of force against and the killing of Jeanette Alatorre on December 17th, 2023 in North Boulder. So I really want to highlight for folks just the table set here that the role of the district attorney is to decide whether criminal charges can be supported and proven beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the legal and ethical standard that we have in every case we prosecute. So every criminal case we prosecute in this jurisdiction and anywhere in the country, the legal standard is a reasonable likelihood of success at trial. Can it be proven beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's the standard for filing charges we have in any case, but it's also the standard we use in investigating and reviewing the investigation of the use of force by police officers, such as here with Officers Schultz and Mastriona. So what that means is we don't review for less stringent civil law standards or any administrative violations or internal policies of the police department. Those are all reviewed in other arenas for the criminal justice process. And our role as a district attorney's office is to determine, again, whether any criminal charges are appropriate and could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in court. So in this case, and the goal always is to make sure the Boulder County investigation team conducts a very thorough, independent investigation and that generate reports and documentation. Those files are often voluminous, and they'll include transcripts of witness interviews, reports, media files, and those media files include police communications, in other words, radio communications, recorded interviews, photographs, and any video recordings related to the incident. That information is then all provided from the critical incident team to the district attorney's office, where they turn over the investigation to us. They provide us with a presentation of all their findings, and then we conduct independent review of their investigation. And we have members of our office who worked very, very hard to go through everything in this investigation to ensure that we reach the right decision. And that's our commitment every time, to do everything we need to do all the work that needs to be done to make sure that we reach the right decision and whether the officer should be criminally prosecuted for any of their actions. I will say, you see there on that second bullet point on your screen, video recordings. There were a lot of video recordings connected to this incident for a couple reasons. First, there was a security video, and you'll see some of what we have from that security video camera at outside a building right near the North Boulder Recreation Center. But also, every police officer who showed up had body-worn camera video recordings. And this incident took approximately 10 to 20 minutes to unfold and be completed before the shooting took place. And all those body-worn camera videos are running throughout that entire time and recorded and then viewed by the team and collected as part of the investigation. So there's a tremendous amount of video here. Some of it more useful than others because when you watch body-worn camera video, keep in mind that the body-worn camera video is usually recording from where the camera is located on the officer's chest. So it's seeing what the camera can see. So if the officer has their hands in front of the camera, in other words, they're pointing a gun or they're pointing at something, or if they're crouched behind a doorway and they're looking above the door, you can't see anything because the camera is pointing right at the door or pointing at their hands. We do have a lot of video in this case that was very useful, and I'll be showing some of it to you today, as I indicated, in determining what happened and whether the officer should be criminally charged or not for anything connected to their actions. So the decision of the district attorney is always going to be based on the rule of law, and it's based on criminal law standards. So again, it doesn't limit any administrative action by law enforcement agencies or any civil actions where lower levels of proof would apply. And in this case, my authority, the authority and role of the district attorney's office was to determine whether the Boulder police officers were involved that committed any criminal offense that could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I will say, based on the thorough investigation, that the analysis of this was clear, but it doesn't minimize how incredibly hard and tragic this situation is. Anytime there's a loss of life, it is tragic. And having met with the family of Ms. Alatorre, and I met with them for a third time today to talk about some of what we were going to cover today and talk about what the investigation provided for us in our review. Ms. Alatorre was very much loved by her family and clearly loved her family. And it's a tremendous loss for them. And I just want to recognize that. So although I have a very clear and defined role and authority as district attorney, as a person, my heart goes out to them. They lost a loved one. And for the community, it's incredibly hard to have a violent encounter of this nature happen in our community. And for the police officers involved, everyone involved, this is an incredibly serious and difficult incident. And I just want to recognize that before I just jump right into talking about the investigation, what the findings were, and the role and decision of the district attorney. So as district attorney, there are three possible outcomes when we have a critical incident of this nature. The first would be the officers could be charged with a criminal offense if there's evidence sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they committed a crime. So, for example, we've done that in the past in this jurisdiction where we've prosecuted police officers, and I've prosecuted police officers in other jurisdictions where I've worked. We had one involving the critical incident team here in Boulder County, where we had two sheriff's deputies who were responsible for the custody and care of an individual who was intoxicated. Their actions led to his death. We prosecuted that case. Both those officers, or both those deputies, were convicted and sentenced to state prison. So that's option one, based on the evidence to determine whether any officer should be prosecuted. Option two is to release a detailed report with our findings, and that's what we did in this case. As you know, that report can be found at the link that you see on your screen there. We include all of the reports from all the prior incidents involving use of force by police officers on the district attorney website. You can go back and look through any of those. If you have questions about this report or any others, feel free to reach out to our office. The third option would be to present the case to a grand jury. Every jurisdiction has a grand jury available to it. We have a grand jury here in Boulder County. Our grand jury can issue subpoenas for individuals to testify. So in other words, if we had police officers who were uncooperative or refusing to give statements, we could issue subpoena or ask the grand jury to issue subpoenas for them to testify. That was not an issue in this case. The grand jury has a number of different functions, and I'm happy to answer any questions about grand juries. One example of a grand jury in an officer-involved shooting would be the Clear Creek County case involving the death of Mr. Glass, where the district attorney there, Heidi McCollum, determined it was necessary, and it was, to put that case in the grand jury, and she ultimately secured indictments against a number of the officers involved there. So that's one of the options when a case is presented to the grand jury. The grand jury can return what's called an indictment or criminal charges, otherwise known as a true bill. The second option is no true bill, which means insufficient evidence that a crime has been committed, and the grand jury can issue a report. So I just wanted to put this slide on the screen to help folks understand what the three possible outcomes are from the district attorney's office when we're reviewing the use of force, including the use of deadly physical force by a police officer or police officers. So I'm going to turn now to start talking about this incident. As I go through it, I'm going to touch on a number of facts. This incident took place over a significant period of time, and I've tried to provide the most salient facts to you in this presentation. For more detailed facts, I'd encourage you to take a look at the district attorney report that's available on our website. Also, the photographs and videos that I present are just a fraction of the photos and videos we have. So if you have questions or you want more information, feel free to reach out to our office, and I'll do my best to make sure that we provide that information to you. I will say, having met with Ms. Alatorre's family, that they've seen everything I'm going to show to you today. They've actually seen more than I'm going to show to you today in terms of photos and videos. And we've been working with them on any additional questions they have, and that communication will definitely continue. So I'm going to start by giving you the background on this incident and then talk about the incident itself. So on October 11th, 2023, a resident in Brighton had reported a burglary and theft of a BB type pistol that looked somewhat real. Ms. Alatorre had been working for that person. Her employment had been terminated by that individual. And after her employment ended, Ms. Alatorre had returned to the resident and asked if she could purchase the fake gun that the woman owned. And the woman declined. She decided not to sell the fake gun or air pistol BB gun to Ms. Alatorre. The following day, Ms. Alatorre entered the home without permission, and she was recorded on camera doing so. When the resident realized that Ms. Alatorre had been in her home without permission, she notified the police. She also looked for the gun, since Ms. Alatorre had expressed interest in it and found the gun to be missing. She called the police and reported it to the police, and the police took a written report based on that complaint. One of the questions we had just now before the start of the town hall was, what did the officers do when they were told by a Brighton resident that she had stolen a BB type pistol? I assume by this question you mean the Brighton police officers or the police officers who responded to the October incident. They took a report on Ms. Alatorre. That report was found when the critical incident team investigators were working on this case and doing a background check on Ms. Alatorre. That's how they came across the report from the October 11th burglary and theft of the BB gun. So I wanted to show you an overview of the scene because this scene covers a lot of ground and went on for quite some time. It was roughly 3 or 4 blocks in the North Boulder area, covering around 15 minutes. So just to get you oriented, I thought at the start of the presentation it'd be helpful for you to see an overview. So you see the yellow dot on the right side of your screen there, start of call. That's where the police first encountered Ms. Alatorre. You also see the rec center there on the right side of the screen to the right of that blue oval. The blue oval also signifies where the first round of what are called less lethal beanbags were used to try to subdue Ms. Alatorre, and I'll come back to that in a little while. But again, I'm just using this for orientation purposes. There's a backpack that Ms. Alatorre dropped at one point. You see that yellow dot on the screen there. And then there's a yellow oval on the left side that says accessed alley. I'll be talking with you about Ms. Alatorre's path of travel as she continued to defy police commands and continued to walk. And she walked down that alley and then back out onto Broadway. Ultimately, you see at the top of the screen there, it says rifle rounds and beanbags. That's where the final encounter took place, where first less lethal beanbags were utilized. Police were unsuccessful, and Ms. Alatorre continued to refuse to comply with police commands, refused to drop the gun, and ultimately 2 police officers, Officers Schultz and Mastriona, discharged their firearms, their rifles, and shot and killed Ms. Alatorre. So this overview is just to give you the lay of the land that we're going to be talking about, just to show you how much ground this covered. This, as I said, went on for quite some time. As a reminder, we're going to be showing you some videos and some photos, and some of these are going to be graphic. So if you don't want to see them, I would encourage you not to watch any further. But if you do, I'm going to be going through these now and sharing with you some of the information that we looked at in evaluating the police conduct that day. The police conduct started with the first contact at the recreation center. And what had happened at the rec center was there was a patron, an individual at the rec center who'd been in the family changing area. There's a women's locker room, men's locker room, and then a family locker room. It's also referred to as the family changing area. That person observed the woman, later identified as Ms. Alatorre, talking to herself and saying, amongst other things, "I have to defend myself." She then displayed to that individual what he believed to be a gun in her purse. He reported to the staff at the recreation center that there was a woman in the family changing area, that he had concerns about her, shared some of his observations, but did not mention the gun. The staff called the police for assistance. So rec center staff called the police. They had they had gone in the back to the family changing area. Ms. Alatorre was locked in one of the changing rooms. Rec center staff refer to those as cabanas, and they had knocked repeatedly and asked her to come out repeatedly, and she had refused. Ultimately, the staff called the police for assistance. That call was recorded and available for us to review as part of the investigation, and we did so. At 3:13 p.m., officers were dispatched to the North Boulder Rec Center in response to this first call. When the police officers entered, staff at the rec center did not want Ms. Alatorre issued a trespass warning or criminally charged. And I think that's a significant point to be aware of, and it's going to be something I talk about later in answering some of the questions you have, because some of the questions are about why the police chose to leave her there, why the police weren't more aggressive was the word in the email I received in responding to her initially. And so some of this is around the fact that the staff at the rec center wanted Ms. Alatorre to be escorted out based on the issues that they were having with her in the restroom, and also the observations and complaint from the other individual at the rec center. They did not want her to be issued a trespass warning or criminally charged. That was a conversation that they and the officers had when the police officers first walked in. That's also captured on video. The officers then went in the family changing area and spent quite a lengthy amount of time in the changing area with Ms. Alatorre. First, trying to get her to open the door to the cabana or bathroom area. And then once the door was opened by Ms. Alatorre, she was in there and she was washing her hair. And she refused to leave and wanted time to finish washing her hair. The Boulder police officers remained there with her and allowed her to do so. And this went on for quite some time. Ultimately, they were able to have her agree to leave the restroom and be escorted outside the rec center. As the officers were driving away from the rec center, Ms. Alatorre blocked one of the officers' cars and challenged that officer to fight her. Officers ultimately were able to leave the scene without taking any further action because Ms. Alatorre began to walk away to the west. And I'll come back to that because we had a question about that as well that just came in before we started the town hall. Shortly thereafter, Ms. Alatorre menaced bystanders with a handgun while outside the rec center. And it began when she walked into the street on Broadway and she was blocking traffic by standing in front of a car. She had her hand concealed in a bag and was pointing the bag in a manner that made the driver of the car believe that she possessed a firearm. And then she actually pulled the gun out of her bag, pointed it at the driver, and he believed it to be a Glock, and he called 911. Another individual, separate from that person, tried to convince Ms. Alatorre to move from the roadway. She pulled a gun from the bag, as he described it, slung across her chest, and yelled, as you see on the screen there, "Back the F up." She pointed the gun at him. He also called 911. Both those 911 calls were recorded. I'm going to turn to the gun in a moment, but when the calls came in, police dispatchers received the 911 calls. All those calls that go into 911 are recorded. The dispatchers then notify police officers in the area to respond. They issued communications over the radio. All those radio communications are also recorded. And what I wanted to mention about the handgun that Ms. Alatorre was using against those individuals is that it looked real. It was later determined to be an air pistol, but also an accurate replica of a real 9mm caliber Beretta handgun. And we'll talk about that more when I talk about the legal analysis. These are photos after the incident of the handgun, the air pistol that Ms. Alatorre was using that day. And I believe in the Boulder Police Department presentation that they'll release later on, they actually have a picture showing this air pistol as compared to an actual Beretta, and you'll see that they look exactly the same. It's designed to be a replica gun. So it looks exactly like it. Some air pistols, as you may know, some BB guns have orange tips or orange colors on the side to indicate to individuals that it's not a real gun. This gun doesn't have any of those. It's an actual replica. but only fires BB guns. It doesn't operate as a real handgun. The next clip I'm going to come to is a video clip, and I'm going to show it to you in a moment. Hopefully you can hear the sound okay, and people in my office will let me know if you can't hear the sound. But what this is as police officers are starting to respond to the call from the rec center, Ms. Alatorre is now walking out on the sidewalk. And police officers are responding back to the rec center for the call of her menacing individuals with a firearm. So again, just to set the stage for you, this is after they've left, after the first encounter, the police officers have left her there. She's now outside. She's been in the street. She's pointed the handgun at a number of different civilians. The two individuals had called 911, and she's now walking on the sidewalk, and police officers are starting to respond to the rec center in response to the 911 call and radio communications about a woman with a gun. In those 911 calls and in the radio communications, the description of Ms. Alatorre was communicated. So when police officers responded, they did have a description of her in terms of what she was wearing and how she looked. And you'll be hearing police sirens, and you'll see Ms. Alatorre coming in from the right-hand side of the screen. So when I hit play, I'll stop talking so you can hear it, but I just want to make sure you understand what's happening. You'll see her walking from right on your screen to left. Then she may have heard the sirens. I can't know for sure, but you'll see her change direction and go up those stairs and towards the front door area, moving somewhat more quickly. And then the police cars presumably see her because they turn around and they stop there and they get out of the car. And then you'll see the interaction between these police officers responding to the call of the gun and also Ms. Alatorre and their interaction. So I'm going to play that video clip now.
Put your bag down. Put your bag down. What? Drop your coat. Put your bag down. Put all your bags down. I'm not going to do whatever you want. Put all your bags down. What? Guess what? I need to see your hands. And I got mad. We'll talk about it. I want to see your hands. I need you to drop all your bags. I'm not going to do what you said. You need to do what I said. Shoot me. I don't need a stop. Bam. I'm not going to do what you said. Drop your stuff. You got that. They told me all, I got people. Stop now. Now, if you don't stop, force can be used against you. Up to me for force. Do you understand me? I need you to drop your bags and get on the ground. No. Drop your bags. No. Drop your bags. I'm not gonna do it. Drop your bags. I'm not gonna do that bag. I'm not gonna do it. Drop your bags. I know who you are. You may stop my way. You may stop my way. Stop. Stop. Get your hands. I know who you are. I got you. Stop. Hands on the bed. Stop.
Okay, so that's the clip from the officers who responded initially to the call of a woman with a gun following the two individuals who had been menaced with a handgun. One of the questions that came in right before we started was just to confirm officers were not aware that she was in possession of what appeared to be a gun when they had escorted her out of the rec center earlier that day. That's correct. So when they were at the rec center with her and waited for her at the bathroom and dealing with that for quite a while, and they escorted her out, they were unaware of what she had in her bags. They were unaware that she had a gun in her possession. This interaction that we just played for you is when the police were responding to the call of a woman with a gun and the menacing incident. So as you saw, the police responded. They referred to themselves as Boulder Police. They're in marked police cars, which means they have lights on the top and Boulder Police insignia on the side. They repeatedly commanded her to show her hands, to stop, and to get on the ground. They warned her that non-compliance could result in force, including lethal force being used against her. This interaction that you saw just now in this clip, this continues on for approximately 12 or 13 minutes, where they're continuing to tell her to stop, to drop, show her hands, then to drop the gun that ultimately she takes out, and that they're going to use force if they have to, including lethal force. This goes on for quite some time. It's repeated over and over and over again. The Boulder Police Department video they're going to release later, they actually put a transcript on the bottom of the video, so you can actually see what's being said. I think you could hear it clearly on that recording, but you'll be able to see it too if you want to look at the Boulder Police Department video that's released later. It's the same video clip that I just showed you, but they added the transcript on the bottom. So as you saw from watching the video, she continued to walk away despite the officer's commands while reaching her hand into one of the bags she was carrying. She then begins waving the bag towards the police officers and around as if she's using the bag to conceal a firearm. She heads north on Broadway before turning west or left on Forest Avenue. She then turns down that, I described it as it's described as an alley, but it's really a small back street between the houses on both sides of the street there. She goes down the alleyway just west of Broadway. The officers in that initial contact team, the ones who were showing up at first, pursued her and observed her looking back while she continued reaching her bag. At one point there, they lost sight of her around the turn, and then when she turned eastbound from the alley, going past an open area, a short time later, she reappears back on Broadway, once again walking northbound, hand in the bag, and ignoring officers' commands. So I'm going to show you another video in just a couple moments, but the police are arriving now in greater numbers, and they're talking about on radio communications and to one another, and you can hear this on the body-worn camera videos as well, about using less lethal beanbag rounds. They were approximately, when they actually used them, 30 to 40 yards away from Ms. Alatorre. A police officer took out what's called a less lethal rifle. You'll see it has orange insignia on it, so that police officers know that it's the less lethal weapon that they could use. Less lethal is used to try to use non-lethal force to subdue an individual in a potentially or violent encounter who's defying police commands. Ultimately, when the police officer fires 4 less lethal beanbag rounds, she was hit 2 or 3 times, her hamstring, right buttocks area, and right arm, but the strikes did not appear to affect her. We know she was hit because of the officer's observations that she was hit with the beanbags. Also, where the beanbag rounds were found in the crime scene analysis matches up with where she was standing at that time. In other words, beanbags were moving through the air, but they were found right there where she was standing. So clearly they had impacted her and then fell to the ground. And then finally, the autopsy report also found bruising consistent with the beanbag rounds, hitting her. But the strikes did not appear to affect her at all. It might be because she was wearing multiple layers of clothing, but whatever the reason, the beanbag rounds that were fired initially, there were 4, did not appear to impact her. As she began crossing to the west side of Broadway, that officer then fired an additional 2 less lethal rounds. So 2 more beanbag rounds also did not appear to affect her or stop her. She then removed what appeared to be a black handgun from her purse. It's the same purse, the same bag she had been reaching into previously. And she held the handgun in her right hand and began pointing it at police officers. She did this repeatedly throughout the next few minutes of this encounter. Officers who were later interviewed, they submitted to voluntary interviews. They did not fire at Ms. Alatorre, as they explained in the interviews, because they identified there were people and cars behind her that could have been accidentally struck. And the law requires that police officers take into account their backdrop or background when deciding whether to use deadly force or not. So the police officers who were involved in this situation, again, they submitted to voluntary interviews. When they were interviewed, they talked about the backdrop and seeing other cars and other people in the area. And you could see from that first video clip, cars were going around the police cars there. So although we end up knowing now as we sit here together going through this PowerPoint, it was incredibly dangerous and ends up being a deadly encounter. But at the time, there's no way the drivers in those cars could have known that. And so when the first two police officers were responding and they're focused directly on Ms. Alatorre and the threat of the handgun, traffic is moving around, people are moving around. And throughout this encounter, there were people on foot and also cars in the area. So that was something that, according to the officers in those interviews, that they were considering in terms of when to use lethal force. There was also an interaction with a car that I wanted to highlight for you. There was law enforcement was trying to shut down Broadway. It's a 4-lane road, as you may know. So they are in some difficulty shutting it down. And there was a very fluid situation. As I said, a lot of cars initially. But they were setting up cars or police vehicles on both ends of this section of Broadway, including at Broadway and Hawthorne. There was a car, though, that presumably did not recognize that the area was trying to be secured by law enforcement, and they had driven around the police vehicle and continued down Broadway. As their driver was continuing down Broadway, Ms. Alatorre then approached that car and appeared to the officers to try to open the door on the passenger side. She was still holding the gun, and the police officers saw her holding the gun, and I'll play a clip of this for you in a little while, in terms of what you see the officer's reaction being. And then she actually walked around and placed the gun on the hood of the car while talking or yelling at the driver. And then she picked the gun back up. Multiple officers were observing this interaction from some distance away. And you'll see on the video clip that I'll play for you that they began running towards the car because they were concerned Ms. Alatorre was going to either carjack the vehicle or shoot the driver. They did not fire at that point, though, even though they explained that they had those concerns in later interviews, because they did not have a clear backdrop behind her and they did not have a line of sight where they thought deadly force should or could be used, given other individuals in the area. In a later interview, the driver was ultimately tracked down by the critical incident team. He stated that he was not actually afraid during the incident. He had not seen the gun. He drove away, though, and you'll hear this in the clip, because he hears police officers announcing, drive away, move away. So he drives off as this is all unfolding. And he was ultimately tracked down by the critical incident team. And as I said, he did not see the gun. So he was not afraid. He was confused about what was happening, but ultimately he drove away. One of the questions that came in was, why was traffic on Broadway not halted at Iris, as officers requested numerous times when the situation escalated? That's a good question. I can't tell you exactly what was going on in the driver's mind, except they did not fully understand that law enforcement was trying to secure the area. It was fairly fluid. Things were developing pretty quickly on the street. So when the car went around the police vehicle, the driver just didn't understand what was happening, nor would I expect someone to expect or predict that this was going to be happening on Broadway during the day. So the police definitely did try to halt traffic, and you'll see that in the video clips. They made a lot of attempts to halt traffic and get civilians out of the area of danger. And that was something that was going on throughout this entire interaction. Okay. So I'm going to show you now the use of the first less lethal shotgun. There were 2 less lethals used. As I indicated, the first one was used and fired 6 less lethal rounds, less lethal beanbags at Ms. Alatorre. This is the clip from that first police officer.
Hey, put the gun down. Put your hands in the air and stop moving now. 270, I'm following. Get out.
270. She's got her hands in her purse. She's pointing towards me. Get down on the ground now! Get down on the ground! Get a shield. Now! Get a shield. Get down on the ground now! I'm gonna hit her with the beanbag. I'm gonna hit her with the beanbag. Hold on. Drop the gun!
Drop the gun now! Drop the gun! Drop the gun, ma'am! Okay.
Fuck. 270. Hit her with 2 to 3 beanbags. We are pushing up.
Okay, so that's the first officer, and you saw the discharge of the 4 beanbag rounds. He believed 2 or 3 had actually hit her. Turned out he was correct, based on the beanbags that were discovered at the scene where she had been standing at that time. We have photos from the crime scene analysis that we've examined. They're not included as part of this presentation, although we've shown them to Ms. Alatorre's family, of each of the beanbag rounds and all the spent rounds from the rifle casings where all those were located. These beanbag rounds were found roughly where she was standing, the ones that impacted her, and then the others were found in the grass off to the side there. The shotgun that was used, that's a less lethal shotgun. So in case you just joined us, the police used less lethal force a number of times. You see again in this video the repeated police commands of drop the gun, get down on the ground, and so on. And then you see and hear Ms. Alatorre's responses and her refusal to drop the gun and her refusal to surrender to police. And then she continues to walk north on Broadway. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to move ahead to another video clip. This starts with that same video clip, but it plays an additional portion. So I'm going to skip ahead to the additional portion here. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to play it from here in just a moment. And what you're going to see is police officers. If I'm clicking on the right part, you're going to see police officers on the other side of the street. And you're going to see them talking to one another, also yelling at Ms. Alatorre to drop the gun and to stop and to comply with police commands, and that force is going to be used against her. That's going to continue. But the importance of this next clip I'm going to show is 2 things. First, you're going to see the police reacting to that car I mentioned. You're going to see the police start running towards the car, and you're going to hear them yelling to one another and then yelling at Ms. Alatorre. And then you're going to see a second officer using a less lethal shotgun. This is another police officer, another less lethal weapon, and he fires 4 times as well for a total of 10 beanbag rounds. But I'll play it from this point on. Then I'll stop it at one point, address a couple things, and then go on. When you see what we're looking at here is police officers on the west side of Broadway walking north, following Ms. Alatorre. When you see red writing on the bottom of the screen there, it's going to appear on occasion. That's the critical incident team had added certain things so that if I or others couldn't hear it, we'd be able to see it at that point. If you're listening carefully, you can hear everything, but the red writing is just them giving some indication of what the investigation had determined. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see Briscoe BWC view. That's always going to be the name of the officer involved. In this case, the last name was Briscoe. BWC stands for body worn camera, and then view. So Briscoe body worn camera. So I'm going to hit play again, and then let me make sure the sound can be heard too.
Drop the gun! Police department, drop the gun! You're good. We will use force. Drop the gun! I can't shoot that far with the thing, man. Drop the gun! Stop walking! Drop the gun! We will use force! Paradigm is right here. All right, let's use the paradigm, guys. You got it? Okay. Hey, fall back behind the paradigm. Fall back behind the paradigm.
Everyone, get out of the way. Everyone in your cars, get out of the way now.
Behind the board. Yo! Let's leave. Go, baby. Drop the gun!
So that was the less lethal shotgun that I referenced.
Gun!
You just heard gun as the word. That's to connect up the two video clips. So this is now moving to the body-worn camera view of Officer Schultz. In that last video clip, it ends with them saying, drop the gun. This one starts with the word gun. That's just to connect up for you the two video clips. Ms. Alatorre is on the left-hand side of your screen there, on the west side of Broadway, outside that construction site. She's moving across the street to the east, to the right-hand side of the screen. And just to give you an idea about what you're going to see here, she's going to move, as I said, left to right, west to east across the screen. You see at the top of your picture there, police officers have at least two cars trying to block off Broadway. There's police officers coming from behind where this officer Schultz is standing. Officer Schultz is going to end up next to that SUV on the right there. And there's an exchange between the two of them. And just as a preview for you, they're talking about what to do. And the officer in the car says, I'm going to hit her with the car. And he starts to actually pick up speed. He stops as Ms. Alatorre stops and points the gun again. So based on the officer interviews, and you'll hear this in the body-worn camera, she's pointing the gun a couple different times at them through this particular sequence, as well as earlier throughout this entire encounter. So I'll play this body-worn camera view for you and then stop it again and pick it up with another camera angle. And let me just, I'm sorry to stop again. I just want to be sensitive to this. This is going to include, unfortunately, the shooting of Ms. Alatorre. So just to be aware, you're going to see something graphic here. And then I'm going to replay it and show you a closer view. So just to be prepared for that.
He's pointing it.
Those are the 4 less lethal rounds that you saw from the other vantage point, from the other camera recording I just played for you. So you just heard those 4, those same less lethal rounds. You just heard them again.
I'm gonna hit
her with my car, dude. Do it now. Hey, watch out, Brendan. You're good. You're good, brother. You're good. I know. That was me. Hey, guys. Go to the camera. I got you. I got you.
Okay, so in this police officer's car, in addition to the body-worn camera devices they were using, this car also has a dash cam recorder. So this is the same car that we were just looking at. This is the car of the police officer who said, I'm going to hit her with the car. And I think you'll then hear that on this clip. Officer Schultz is standing directly to the left of this car. You're looking north on Broadway. Officer Mastriona and the officer who used the less lethal shotgun are off to the left side of your screen there, so you can see them there. And I'm going to play this dash cam view for you now.
Dude. Stop!
Did you copy? We need
my car, dude. Do it now.
So the suspect is in a pink hat, very ready, closing again.
So this is a close-up. This was the close-up that the critical incident team put together. So what you just watched, I just want to be clear because I've seen these many times, but I know you're seeing this. I mean, her family's also seen it, but many of you have seen it for the first time. So what I would highlight for you here is that you watched the body-worn camera recordings from where Officer Mastriona and the other officers were, including Briscoe on that left side of the street, west side of Broadway. I've shown you Officer Schultz's body-worn camera video and the shots being fired, the 9 shots by him, and you hear the 3 shots by Officer Mastriona. Then the dash cam video captures Ms. Alatorre crossing the street. The significant part here, and it's hard to see, but the critical incident team did their best to try to blow this up so that I could see this more clearly. So I'm going to show you the blown up version that they showed me as part of the investigation presentation. The key part of this is during the voluntary interviews by the police officers, they talked about, once again, she turns and she's pointing the gun at them and then points the gun as she's about to enter someone's driveway. And that's what prompted Officer Schultz, who then had a clear backdrop based on statements he provided in his interview, and he began shooting, and Officer Mastriona shot as well. And we'll come back to the sequence of shots in just a minute, but I'm going to play this close up for you.
Did you copy? We need your father Iris.
My car, dude. Do it now.
So the suspect is in a pink hat, very ready, closing again.
Okay. So those are the video clips from the shooting itself. The officers had observed her point the gun at them again. You can hear statements on the body-worn camera video throughout this entire thing about her doing so and what to do in response, including that comment about whether to hit her with a police car. Officer Schultz, when he provided his interview to the investigators, he talked about how he personally had observed Ms. Alatorre point the gun in this direction on 3 separate occasions, and on the 3rd occasion, he had a clear backdrop, and he still believed his life and the lives of other officers and civilians to be in danger, and that's when he fired 9 consecutive rifle rounds. There's a really significant statement that's included in the decision letter that we released from the district attorney's office about Officer Schultz thinking that at one point she was going to shoot him through his skull, and that was his concern throughout this as she continued pointing the gun at police officers. Officer Mastriona, when he was interviewed, talked about Ms. Alatorre falling to the ground, but then raising her torso and arm in a manner as if she was going to sit up and begin firing at officers, and he fires 3 consecutive rifle rounds. As you may have heard when you watch the video, the first of his shots is actually happening as Officer Schultz's last shot is being fired. So they sound like they're right in line with one another. They are, in that the 9th shot by Officer Schultz is at the same time as the first shot by Officer Mastriona. Okay, so the next slide I'm going to show you is actually a picture of Ms. Alatorre. So the homeowners who lived in that house where the driveway is, they were aware that police were outside. They were aware that something was happening. And after Ms. Alatorre was shot, so after she was shot, they began filming with their phone. So I'm going to show you a picture from their phone. It's of Ms. Alatorre on the ground, and I'll go to that picture now. And you see there, and on the video provided by the family that lives at that residence, you can see she still had her hand on the gun and her finger on the trigger, actually, of this gun. And you can see that clearly on the video that the family took, and they were cooperative with the law enforcement investigation and turned over the video. When she fell to the ground, initially Ms. Alatorre was still moving, and you could see her moving, and she had the gun in her right hand. And I'm going to talk about the medical aid being rendered by law enforcement, but the family recorded this on their phone and then provided the entire recording to law enforcement, and that was included in the presentation to my office and also what I showed to the family of Ms. Alatorre. Medical aid rendered. So shots were fired at 4:26 p.m. on this day, December 17th. 2 teams of police officers were formed immediately after, and the officers began approaching Ms. Alatorre while holding their shields. They noted that she was still moving and still had the gun. On the video, you can hear them clearly yelling for her to drop the gun. Someone saw that her hand was moving, and in fact, on the video from the family, you can see that her hand was still moving. Ultimately, what they call a contact team, and based on the information from the investigators, that's when the police go up to contact the individual who's on the ground. Contact team approached her and secured the gun at 4:28. The call for paramedics was made at 4:28 p.m. All this information is recorded. Officers then performed CPR and immediately began working on locating wounds on Ms. Alatorre and trying to treat those wounds and applying aid to stop the bleeding until paramedics arrived there at 4:31. And between the officers and the paramedics, that medical aid continued until, unfortunately and tragically, she was pronounced dead at the scene. So I'm going to turn now to talk about the crime scene analysis. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because it's detailed in the report, but happy to take any questions if people have questions about it. But a total of 10 spent beanbag casings were located in the area. The locations of those and the number of those were consistent with the body-worn camera footage, as well as the officer interviews. So in other words, on the body-worn camera footage, you can see and hear 6 less lethal rounds by the first officer, 4 less lethal rounds by the second officer, for a total of 10. 10 spent beanbag casings were located in the area. Both of those officers submitted to voluntary interviews as well, the ones who used less lethal shotguns, and they accounted for, they were described using or firing 6 times and firing 4 times for a total of 10. So that was all consistent. A total of 12 spent caliber casings from the rifles were located. That's also consistent with the body-worn camera footage and the officer interviews. Officer Schultz fired 9 times. Officer Mastriona fired 3 times. One thing I would add, and it's also described in detail in the report, if you want to take a look at it, is after this incident, the firearms were all seized and subject to what's called a round count, where investigators from the critical incident team go through all the firearms to determine if anybody fired, and those that did fire, how many rounds were fired from the weapon. And ultimately, the 12 casings that were found on the at the crime scene matched up with what was found in the firearms belonging to Officer Schultz and Officer Mastriona for a total of 12. Other officers' firearms were examined to determine if any of them had fired their guns, and none of them fired. And that was part of the investigation by the critical incident team, including by the crime scene analyst who responded to the scene. And as I mentioned, upon inspection, Ms. Alatorre's handgun was determined to be a replica, so actually an air pistol, although it did not have any plastic tip of coloring to indicate to an observer that it was actually an air pistol and not a real 9mm gun. When the police initially went up to her after she was on the ground and while she still had the gun in her hand, they took the gun from her hand and they tossed it a couple feet away out of arm's reach and ended up on the grass outside that house where it remained for the crime scene analysis. But you could see that clearly on the body-worn camera video, as well as the video from the homeowner who filmed the police response at that point. So I'm going to turn now and just talk about the autopsy briefly and the medical findings from the forensic pathologist. Ms. Alatorre sustained 8 rifle wounds, 1 in her left shoulder, 2 in her lateral right abdomen, 1 to her left abdomen, 1 to her right hip, 1 to her left arm, 1 to her lower left leg, and 1 to her right foot. There were no rifle wounds to her back. When the autopsy was conducted, a lot of photographs were taken. There are a number of people from the critical incident team there as well. One of the things that the forensic pathologist and the individuals there did is use trajectory rods to determine the trajectory of bullets. All of the wounds that they were able to determine were front to back. In other words, none of the wounds are coming from, none of the shots were coming from behind Ms. Alatorre or at her back. All of them went front to back. This is all detailed in the photographs from the autopsy, but also in the autopsy report provided by the forensic pathologist. A total of 11 bullet fragments were recovered and collected during the autopsy. The cause of death was multiple rifle wounds. The manner of death was homicide. Homicide, as a definition, means killed by another person. That's clearly what happened here, obviously. So that's cause of death and manner of death in this case. So as part of the investigation, one of the questions that we had was, what happened here? Why did she engage in this conduct? Why point the gun at these different civilians and menace them? Why continue to engage the police? Why point the gun at them over and over and over again and defy police commands? Especially since it wasn't even a real gun. I mean, what was going on here? So as part of the critical incident team investigation, they look at a number of things. First, at the crime scene, suspected methamphetamine and fentanyl, or her belongings were collected and suspected methamphetamine, and fentanyl were located in her belongings. We have photographs of all that. A blood test was done. That toxicology analysis showed to be positive for caffeine, amphetamine, and also importantly, perhaps methamphetamine. Ms. Alatorre's criminal history, which includes criminal convictions that are detailed in the decision letter. Also, she was on probation at the time. So this information was provided to us as part of the investigation into how can we understand what Ms. Alatorre was thinking and doing at the time. And this information was provided as part of the investigation into that question. Investigators also spoke with an individual who knew Ms. Alatorre previously. He reached out to law enforcement after the shooting. He contacted law enforcement to tell law enforcement that she often displayed the gun in his presence. He didn't believe it was a real gun, but she would make statements to him, such as the one you see on the screen there. I'm going to turn now to the legal analysis. So I've gone over the facts from the critical incident team's investigation and shown you some of the clips from that day. And I'm going to turn now to the legal analysis. And there are really two statutes that apply. And I want to make sure I'm thorough in this explanation, but I'm going to try not to talk like a lawyer too much. But I want to share with you the two statutes that we utilize in reviewing the use of force by police officers. So the two statutes, the first is 18-1-707. I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, but it details when police officers can use physical and deadly physical force. And it talks about how police officers can only use physical force if non-violent means would be ineffective in either effecting an arrest, preventing an escape, or preventing an imminent threat of injury to a police officer or another person. And the statute refers to police officers as peace officers, and that's why you see that language on your screen there. When physical force is used under 18-1-707, a peace officer shall not use deadly physical force to apprehend a person who's suspected of only a minor or non-violent offense. So in other words, shoplifter from Target, under the law here in Colorado, police officers are not permitted to use deadly physical force to apprehend a person on a shoplift case. Police officers are only allowed to use a degree of force consistent with the minimization of injuries to others, and to ensure that assistance and medical aid are rendered to any injured or affected persons as soon as practicable. And that's why I included that slide with the medical aid to show the time between shots being fired at 4:26, the contact team making contact and getting the gun out of Ms. Alatorre's hand at 4:28, and medical aid starting right then and there. Also, to ensure that any identified relatives or next of kin of persons who've sustained serious bodily injury or death are notified as soon as practicable. That's required by law. Also, the coroner's office has a practice and protocol and requirements about notifying next of kin and family members. And in this situation, the Boulder Police Department went through their checklist of trying to locate family members of Ms. Alatorre. The coroner's office went through their checklist, and not to speak for the Boulder Police Department or the coroner's office, but there was a significant delay and inability to identify next of kin for Ms. Alatorre. Her family did not find out immediately. And the Boulder Police Department, I believe, has publicly stated that they regret that, and they've talked about the steps they took to try to identify any next of kin and family of Ms. Alatorre. And I just want to share and recognize that anytime there's a delay in notification of a family, obviously in any death, obviously that's incredibly upsetting to a family. So I want to acknowledge that. And I know the Boulder Police Department has already stated publicly, I just saw an article this morning about it, that they took steps that they're supposed to take to try to track down any next of kin. And I know the coroner's office has a checklist they use as well. And for additional information, you can reach out to the Boulder Police Department or the coroner's office about the responsibility for notifying relatives or next of kin. The next point, and this is an important one for the legal review, is under Colorado case law, the facts must be viewed as they appeared to the officers at the time. So under the law, and there's a case or cases from the appellate courts in Colorado that guide this part of my legal analysis and our legal decision here. Future developments are irrelevant to the legal analysis. And this is a good case for us to discuss this for a moment. So, for example, in this case, the civilians and the police officers all believe this handgun to be real. They all responded to it as though the handgun was real, and the actions they took were in response to a handgun they believed to be a real gun. And as the photos indicate, it appeared to look like a real gun. Afterwards, we all learn through the police investigation, the critical incident team investigation, that it was not, in fact, a real gun. The analysis of their conduct has to be focused on the facts that were viewed as they appeared to the officers at the time. So that's how we view the conduct in this case. So let's turn to the use of deadly physical force, since that's what we had here, and what the law requires under 18-1-707. A peace officer is justified in using deadly physical force to make an arrest only when all other means of apprehension are unreasonable given the circumstances, and the following conditions apply. The arrest is for a felony involving conduct including the use or threatened use of deadly physical force by an individual. The suspect poses an immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury to another person. The force employed does not create a substantial risk of injury to other persons. So if you break that down and apply it to this situation, the arrest is for a felony, including conduct, including the use or threatened use of deadly physical force. That felony menacing with the handgun against the two civilians and also later against the police officers, that would qualify as an arrest for a felony involving conduct involving or the threatened use of deadly physical force. The suspect poses an immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury to the peace officer or another person. And again, it's the perception at the time that this is a real gun, and Ms. Alatorre continuing to point the gun at civilians who then call 911 and also at the police officers over and over and over again. And the force employed does not create a substantial risk of injury to other persons. This is all from 18-1-707. And we circle back then to why the police are required to, under the law, and I believe as part of their training, but the law certainly requires them to consider the backdrop and what's in the background when they use deadly physical force. Then there's so when we look at 18-1-707, that's the use of force by police officers. That's the law, the statute that we look at in Colorado to determine whether police officers committed a crime or whether their use of force was justified under the law. There's also a statute that applies to everyone else, including you and me. So civilians have the right to defend themselves under 18-1-704. It's a separate statute, different statute. Police officers and civilians alike both can use force to defend themselves under 18-1-704. And in relevant part, it reads, a person is justified in using physical force in order to defend himself or a third person from what he reasonably believes to be the use or imminent use of unlawful physical force by that person, and may use a degree of force which he reasonably believes to be necessary for that person. In a case involving use of force and deadly physical force by law enforcement, we look at 18-1-704 because it applies to everyone, and 18-1-707 because that applies to police officers. The use of physical force in this case was lawful under 18-1-707 and 18-1-704 sub 1. And under the applicable law in Colorado, no criminal charges can or should be filed against the two officers. They did not commit a crime and certainly did not commit a crime that could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'll summarize that in the next slide where I will highlight a couple things for you. First, the people who encountered Ms. Alatorre that day believe she had a real gun and used it to threaten civilians and police officers. Nonetheless, although I focus as district attorney on whether the police officers or any person committed a crime that could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, any way you cut it, this is a really tragic and terrible incident due to the loss of Ms. Alatorre's life. She was very much loved by her family, and she clearly loved her family. It was reasonable, though, under the circumstances, for the officers to believe Ms. Alatorre posed a threat to the lives of others at the time. So under the law, the police officers did not commit a crime that could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in court. I want to recognize that these cases are incredibly important to all the people involved and also to the officers involved, as well as everyone's loved ones and to the community as a whole. And I want to recognize that sorry. I want to recognize that the cooperation provided by the Boulder Police Department allowed the critical incident team to respond as quickly as they did and to conduct an incredibly thorough investigation, including the interviews of civilians, I mean, the people at the rec center, the community members involved, the community members threatened with the handgun by Ms. Alatorre, also other people in the area and all the police officers who were involved in this situation. The decision letter from the district attorney's office that was first provided to Ms. Alatorre's family, then it was released to the public. I believe it was last Thursday that we released it to the public, Thursday afternoon. We also posted the decision letter on the district attorney's website. And just as an important reminder, I would highlight for you that a couple things first. Sorry, I'm just looking at a question. Couple important reminders. First, obviously, Ms. Alatorre lost her life in this incident, and I feel terrible for everyone involved in this situation. It is a really tragic and sad situation, however you look at it. And I recognize that these incidents also matter a lot to our community as a whole. One of the most important things I do as district attorney is review officers' use of force and determine whether they should be charged with a crime. So I think it goes to the trust that we place in police officers and the power and authority they have. So I can promise you that our staff looks at these things very closely. There are a number of attorneys on staff who worked incredibly hard to go through all these materials and make sure that I and our office had a complete understanding of what took place in reaching the decision that police officers did not commit a criminal offense that could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. That was clear from the video evidence and all the evidence provided to us and all the information provided to us. But the fact that the legal analysis was clear doesn't make this any less tragic. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I also wanted to acknowledge the impact it has on the police officers and their families. I know the police officers were placed on administrative leave after this happened, and it definitely had an impact on them. And I say that based on watching the interviews of the police officers and also from talking to their supervisors since then. And I'm going to turn now to questions from community members. So as I indicated, we got an email, or I received an email from someone with five questions. And I'm going to turn to that slide, and then I have a text message with the 4 questions I was asked earlier, and I just want to make sure I hit all 4 of those. All right, so let's go through some questions. Why did the rec center staff not demand that she be cited or arrested for trespass? And what I would highlight for you as I read these questions to you, these questions all came from one individual. His general approach in the email was that the police should have been more assertive, aggressive. I don't recall the word in the email, but in their response to Ms. Alatorre, but also the rec center's response to Ms. Alatorre. So why did the rec center staff not demand that she be cited or arrested for trespass? I'm not sure of the answer to that question. My belief upon watching the video is they determined that she needed to be removed from the rec center given the concerns that had been communicated to them, the disturbance that she caused, and her refusal to leave the bathroom area after being repeatedly asked to do so. Ultimately, though, they said they didn't feel the need for her to be arrested. The police officer said when they entered, I'm paraphrasing here, do you want her to be trespassed? Do you want her to be charged? And they said, no, we just want her out of here. So that's the decision the rec center staff made. I got the sense from the email that the person was critical of the rec center staff's decision. I'm not in a role to judge. I would just say simply that they decided that they didn't want law enforcement action beyond her being escorted out of the rec center. Why wasn't Ms. Alatorre searched or arrested by the police at the rec center? It's a good question. Again, it goes back to the information by the rec center staff that they did not want her charged or arrested. Once they had that information, I do think it limits on a legal basis their ability to search her bag. She had a couple bags with her, the large backpack and the smaller bag. So when the police officers encountered her at in the bathroom, the bags were in the bathroom area with her, but they were on the ground. And arguably, Ms. Alatorre, and this is just my take on it as district attorney, you'd have to ask the police officers involved if this is why they didn't search her. But arguably, she has Fourth Amendment protections, given that she wasn't going to be arrested and was not posing a danger at that time. She actually had a pair of scissors within reach. The police officers did remove that pair of scissors from her because those did potentially pose some danger to her. She had the scissors within arm's reach when she was washing her hair. And when the police escorted her out of the rec center, they put the scissors on the ground and they explained to her they were going to leave the scissors on the ground out of her reach, but she could pick the scissors up after they left, since the scissors belonged to her, but they did not want her handling the scissors when they were within arm's reach. Wouldn't the police have found her warrants if they ran a check on her? Again, this was an email question from that community member. My recollection is that she did not have any outstanding warrants when they were in contact with her. So that Brighton report had been taken by the police. That was a report that was on file, but she did not have, to my knowledge, any outstanding warrants for her arrest. And I'll confirm that to be true, but that's my recollection. What about the toxicology report? Was she high? The community member asked in the email to me. The answer is yes, we got results from the toxicology report, and I've hit on those results during this presentation, including that she had methamphetamine in her blood analysis at the time of her death. Was this person experiencing homelessness at the time? Was another question from that same community member. Was this person experiencing homelessness at the time? That was the understanding of the police based on a number of factors. I asked her family about that this morning, and they asked me to share with you that she did have paperwork in her possession that had an address on it, and that she had an address. The police had information that she was possibly experiencing homelessness at the time, but the family is informing that she had an address to which mail was being sent, and I told the family I would pass that along to you today. So let's go to the couple questions I have in my text string here. Okay, first question, what did you learn about Ms. Alatorre's mental health? So I'm gonna pause on answering that question to see what information we have that is public about Ms. Alatorre's mental health. I did learn some things about Ms. Alatorre's mental health, but I want to be careful about respecting her privacy and the privacy of her family. And I'm going to see what we have available from past cases that's public information about her mental health. And then I'm happy to follow up with the person who submitted this question if I can share that specific information that we have. And I've also had some communication with her family about this issue, but again, I'm going to share what I can publicly. Where was she from? I'm going to have to check on that, and I'll get back to the person who submitted that question in terms of where Ms. Alatorre was from originally. A couple of these questions I've answered during the presentation. Why did police officers, here's another question that I had gotten. Why did police officers choose to drive away? Stop sharing my screen here for a second. Okay. Why did police officers choose to drive away from the rec center when the suspect was acting violently and trying to fight them as she left? That's a question for the Boulder Police Department. I don't know the answer to that question. If I were to guess, and it's only a guess, it would be they decided to exercise restraint and leave as opposed to placing her under arrest there and then. And but you'd have to go to the Boulder Police Department to ask why they chose to drive away from the rec center as opposed to engaging her when she threatened or challenged them to fight her at that intersection. Okay, the next question is who is on Zoom? And I actually don't know the answer to that right now. The way we set up the discussion, I'm looking at a screen that includes my picture and a couple members of the district attorney's office. You presumably are seeing me on your screen. Attendees who join, and we currently have 20 people. So 20 people joined us today. The 20 people who are on right now, I can't see who they are. I just know 20 is the number. And that's being texted to me by members of our staff who are watching the Q&A and the attendee numbers. So I'm going to pause for a second and see if there are any other questions before I start up here. And I know we've gone long, so thank you for those who've hung in to the end here. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Someone just asked how to ask a question. So they've been directed to the Q&A. So I'm going to talk for a minute or two as we wrap up and then see if there's any other questions that are submitted to the Q&A. I appreciate the questions that we've had, if that's helpful. I know we only have a small number of people attending, and that includes people from the district attorney's office. Ms. Alatorre's family told me they were going to join today as well. People from Boulder PD are on. So when you think about how many of those folks are from those groups, and then we have 20 attendees total, it's a very small number of community members who've joined us today. But I think these presentations are really important, even though we have a small turnout. I assume that we have a small turnout because a lot of the questions people may have had are answered in the district attorney's decision letter that was released last week. That decision letter, as I said, was provided to the family of Ms. Alatorre. Then it was provided to the Boulder Police Department and the critical incident team. And then we provided it later that same day in the afternoon to the community and to the media. So I want to recognize this happened in North Boulder in the middle of the day. I mean, it was 4:30 or so, but basically the middle of the day. So a shocking incident for our community. It caused people a lot of concerns about community safety. I heard from several community members after this incident about their concern for the welfare of them and their families, and I recognize that concern. I've also received some feedback about the police response and gratitude from community members for the police responding as quickly as they did and in the manner they did and exercising restraint throughout. And I passed it along because those aren't questions, but that's community feedback that was sent to me by community members. And certainly when I look at the clock and I see that we've gone over, I'm not surprised because this tragic incident, first of all, I think it deserves a full discussion, but also it went on for a long time. So I've shown you different parts of the video evidence, but the video evidence actually goes on for that entire 10 to 15 minute period. I think the Boulder Police Department video link they're going to send out later captures it as 13 minutes in length, and they're going to share a 9.5 minute clip. So you'll see that from the Boulder Police Department. It covers most, if not everything that I just showed to you. But I encourage you, if you have interest, to watch what the Boulder Police Department releases later today. And I appreciate that they're doing so in an effort to be transparent themselves, and that this is going to be a new thing that they do. So in addition to the community town halls that the district attorney office hosts after any officer involved incident, I believe the Boulder Police Department is going to be releasing videos as well. So those are a couple things I wanted to share with you. We actually don't have any additional questions coming in, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm available if you have additional questions, so I'm going to give you my email address. So if you have a pen handy, or if you want to type it into your phone, my email address is mdougherty@bouldercounty.gov, mdougherty@bouldercounty.gov. If you have a question, feel free to submit a question to me, and I'll do my best. And we as an office will do our best to always respond to every email we receive and any question we receive, especially an incident as tragic and unfortunate as this one. So seeing no further questions, I'm going to sign off, but thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope all of you take care and have a nice day. Thanks.